And we turn now to our political panel, Democratic strategist Madeline Somerville and Republican strategist Melik Abdul. Madeline, Melik, great to have you both. Melik, I'd like to start with you. You know, one Republican who slammed this bill for weeks was Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin. And we have a clip from him just from weeks ago. Here it is.
I am the champion of our children and grandchildren whose future is being mortgaged right now, and we're not fixing it. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You know, why do we want to be in a majority if we don't actually fix the excesses of the Democrats?
So spending, obviously a key concern here. We're learning now almost 3 hours after this vote began. Johnson, other holdouts, including Senators Lee, Scott, Lummis, they walked out of Senate Majority Leader John Thune's office with the vice president, headed to the Senate floor, cast those final procedural votes to advance the bill. What are your thoughts on that change of heart, really at the last possible second?
Well, I think it's a good thing. And just so the American people would know, this was a procedural motion to actually move the bill to the floor for a debate. And I think a lot of times we kind of get caught up in the procedural and not understanding that a lot of these bills, whether it's the Democrats or Republicans, they don't allow the bills to go to the floor. And because all Democrats voted against moving the bill to the floor, it provided some opportunity there. But I think what Ron Johnson is articulating, I would say probably a standard position here. But because Donald Trump is really behind the bill and the number of things in the bill and the fears of what would happen if the bill doesn't get passed, you do see more Republicans pushing this through. But what happens henceforth, we don't know, but my hope is that the bill, we actually get it through.
So, Madeline, the president has been committed to this deadline of July 4th to get this on his desk. We've seen him soften that language, the timeline a bit in recent days, but then also stay late last night to oversee the bill's passage out of the Senate. How likely is it we do see this bill on the president's desk by July 4th now?
I have a feeling that we will see the bill on the president's desk. Now, he is a master of messaging, and so it makes sense that he would soften his language a little bit. But from what we've heard, there is a massive celebration planned for July 4th. There's going to be marching bands and fireworks. And I think that President Trump is really, really good at putting a whole show together. And so I think he's going to do literally whatever he needs to, in addition to primarying people who are simply voicing their own concerns. He's supposed to be the president that listens to both sides, including primarying these people who are voicing their true concerns about their constituents.
So let's talk a little bit about the fallout, too. You know, Melik, Elon Musk calling this political suicide for the Republican Party. Many polls also reflecting, we have about 4 we highlighted here. Red shows those in opposition. And these polls really demonstrate that there are a lot of folks who don't support this legislation. And some of the party are concerned about that and what that might spell for the future. What's your reaction to some of the criticism it's now facing?
Well, as you can see with Elon Musk, and I want many people, my colleagues on the right, to understand that Elon Musk, irrespective of the phone call from J.D. Vance and Susie Wiles and Elon Musk's sort of an apology to Donald Trump, he's continuing to campaign against the America First agenda. So nothing about this is surprising to me when it comes to Elon Musk. I was expecting there would be some level of pushback because, again, there are some valid concerns that many Republicans have about the bills, whether that is the Medicaid cuts or some of the other things, the SALT deduction. So some of this is what we're watching is the sausage making process, and the sausage making process, unfortunately, is just never easy.
What do you believe, Melik? I'll just follow up quickly because so many voters say they don't want this. What do you believe will be the task of the Republican Party? How will they sell this to voters or attempt to if this bill does in fact pass? What are the biggest selling points?
Well, I think one of the biggest things, of course, we've talked about it many times before, but the things that Donald Trump talked about during the campaign, the no taxes on tips, the no taxes on overtime. But remember, there's also some child tax care deductions that are in there. But at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter because those are kind of the things that people don't pay a lot of attention to. I compare this much so to what happened during the debate over the strikes. Initially, people were supportive of the strikes, but then the very next day, they weren't supportive of those strikes in Iran. And I think it's the more people hear about the things that are actually in the bill, because a lot of the coverage is negative, the more they hear about the things in the bill, I do suspect that they will then begin to actually favor the bill. But it's also important to know that it also splits along ideological lines.
It does. And Madeline, I'll give you a chance to respond there and then try to sneak another question here, too.
Sure. And I'd actually love to address the quote from Elon Musk quickly, because I think that Elon Musk's opposition to this bill actually illustrates a divide within the party that actually Marjorie Taylor Greene's talked about as well. So Elon Musk, the trope that we've heard from the Trump administration is that he's upset because the electrical vehicle tax credit is going away. Well, the Senate parliamentarian just took that piece out of the bill. And so what's he upset about now, right? And he's still come out against this. And I think personally, just as a strategist, that what he's actually upset about is the fact that the states are not going to be allowed to regulate AI for the next 10 years. And that's what's in this bill. And senators like Marjorie Taylor Greene, even the Republican senator, has come out against it. So once that second reconciliation process happens, in order for that final vote to happen, they're gonna try to get that piece passed as an amendment. Once that reconciliation process happens again, I think you might hear Elon Musk come out again about it. That's the overall problem, though, in response to what my colleague has just said, is that there are splits along ideological lines, but also within the party that matter. And I think that if people took the time to deal with the nuances and the gray areas, that maybe the people would start trusting their legislators more.
Well, I think that's a very fair point. You know, Melik, I'd like to ask you, there's been some discrepancy between, or people have challenged, let's say, the CBO scoring, how this is going to play out financially. There are so many concerned that this is going to add to the deficit. The president firing back saying, you know, this isn't taking into account all the economic growth we're going to see as a result of this bill's passage. So do you believe, what's the timeline for voters? When will they grade the effectiveness of this bill? Obviously, the president has to have in his mind that the midterms are really right around the corner.
I think once we get into the fall, really the start of the midterm season, you'll see people actually starting to pay attention to the things that were actually in the bill. I think that the Trump administration, which is why the question that you asked earlier was really good, is what is the Republican, what is it that we need to do? And that thing that we need to do is now, between now and the start of the midterm cycle, because you can be rest assured, Democrats will use a lot of the negatives that they feel about the bill and to campaign against Republicans. Republicans are going to have to double down. Republicans are going to have to be on message when it comes to articulating what are the policies that Donald Trump is promoting that is helpful to them. If they don't do that, we may be looking at some problems in the midterms.
All right, we have about 20 seconds left. Madeline, last word.
Sure. So I think the Democrats would do much better if they would focus their messaging on the fact that the Senate parliamentarian took out major promises that the Trump campaign promised to their constituents that were supposed to be in this bill. And now what they're doing in the process is debating, trying to get those provisions put back in because they violated the Byrd rule, which says that it all has to be related to the budget. And this stuff isn't. They're just trying to stick in random policy points. So I think if Democrats would say, hey, you're breaking the rules, you're messing this up, maybe they, instead of just having these big blanket messages that kind of go in one ear and out the other, they do much better.
All right, Melik, Madeline, what a great panel. Great to have you both. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.